Hey, and welcome to the Katie Truther podcast. I'm your host, KT Truther. Today, I am so excited to bring Brendon Green, a master Mason. He is involved with the secret society of the Freemasons. And I feel very bold doing this. As we know, there's a lot of conspiracy, and hopefully we can get some of these questions that plague us and assumptions right out of the way. Thanks so much for joining me, Brendon. How are you today?
How are you doing? I'm well.
Awesome. Thanks so much for being here. And so I just want to dive right in and you to give us a baseline of what is a Freemason?
So basically, Freemasonry is a secret society, but we're more a society with secrets. It's a guild based around camaraderie for men, typically, although there are female aspects of it that have grown into fruition over time. Basically, it was a meeting place where men could free think. As an example, if you look at like the Renaissance time frame, Galileo and some of these scientists, where they would talk about something that differed from the church, that was considered to be a flagrant violation. And in fact, Galileo was put in prison for speaking about basically astrophysics, that, you know, with the earth being round and the sun being, you know, the center of the universe of our galaxy, they would be put in jail for speaking anything that was going against what the church was considered common thinking at the time. And so one of the earliest guilds was Illuminati, and started by a guy named Adam Weishaupt. And again, they were like-minded men that, you know, just like today, you can imagine any type of club where you can speak freely amongst peers, whereas you can't do that elsewhere. If you look at Spaces on X, would be a really good example of a public square, typically the good spaces, where you can have this somewhat confrontational, but a good dialogue of conversation. And that's what Freemasonry was about as far as the time frames. But it delves deep into esoterics and symbology as well. And the earliest signs of that would be found in ancient Mesopotamia, ancient Egypt, which, of course, if you've seen the capping stone on top of on the dollar bill, that comes directly from esoteric symbology. And through time, symbology is used with Masonry to describe certain levels and certain aspects of reach, networking, camaraderie. By the way, one of the fears that the founding fathers had, because the Illuminati did get infiltrated by people that had wielding power, and it's very similar. They were afraid that leakage could happen within Freemasonry. And just a little bit of topic on it. 9 signers of the Declaration of Independence were Freemasons. Hancock, right, Washington, Hamilton, and there have been 13 U.S. presidents. So the guild is very dynamic in what we have today. Even in the House of our legislating bodies are direct reflections of the Freemasonic constitutions. And in fact, the entire Constitution of the United States is directly from Freemasonry.
Wow, that's off to an incredible start. Thank you so much for giving us a good baseline. And I hope our audience is automatically, instantly intrigued by this. I think the whole aspect of secret society, people want to know what are the secrets, right? And we're experiencing so much secrecy, just even within our own government right now. So it's like, where can our bandwidth go? When you boil it down to the purpose of Freemasonry,
Mm-hmm.
what do you think is the best explanation of the purpose of having that?
So the purpose was finding men of character and making them better, right? And one of the tenets of being a Mason is you have to believe in something more powerful than yourself. You can't be against God or be an atheist. You have to believe in an all-powerful being. The G in Freemasonry is either God or, you know, geometry. But it is still a belief. And whether you believe that Big Bang happened and henceforward is all mathematics and time itself, that's still something that created us, because without time, you wouldn't have anything, you know, here. Having said that, the camaraderie that you share from degree learning and rituals is just like a fraternity in college or a sorority, only without the partying, right? Like, you basically go through the same things that your brother has, And that's what gives you the stitching or fabric in Freemasonry. But hearkening to the original founding of it, it really finds its origin in the stone building guilds of the cathedral churches. And at the time, people were coming all across Europe to basically steal the master's work. So we developed handshakes and words that I could notice my brother, Master Mason, even in the dark. That's also a slight saying where we say coming from darkness to light. That's the raising of a Master Mason. And basically what it is you are living in the enlightenment of who we call Hiram Abiff. And he was the master of Solomon's temple. And he died protecting the secrets while people were trying to infiltrate the temple. So a Mason can go anywhere in the world, and if a lodge is disassembled, we can reassemble it just by a memory of what it's supposed to look like, which consists of north, south, east, and west, and it's aligned that way when you go into the chambers. It's very similar to even the legislation house now, and in fact, there are what we call chambers of reflection in the sub-basement of the house to this day that were put there by Pierre Lafont, who designed all of DC, who was a Mason also. And you've probably heard, that most of DC is aligned based on square and compasses and angles, and all of that is true. So that symbology was embedded from the forefathers, not so much to be praising of God, because I want to make it clear, we're not a religion, but we accept many religions. So I've been in lodges with Muslims, Hindu, Jewish, never an atheist. However, ironically, some of the bad rap we get was because Aleister Crowley, the founder of the Satanic Church, got to the second degree, and then basically we consider that person, someone who's not up to par, a profane or cowan, and he was found not to be fit, and he was ousted. And then he went and started the Satanic Church, and some of their rituals do involve 3 degrees of Freemasonry. They're literally stolen from us. Oddly enough, if you believe in the devil, that means you believe in God. So you would be accepted in a lot of lodges in modern day, international lodges, because of the fact that it is heralded as a god, although on earth. Of course, 99% of Masons I've ever met would completely be diehard against that. But it's just amazing the reaches that it has. And, we have direct ties to the Knights Templar. The Shriners International Guild is ours. You cannot become a Shriner without being a Mason. And from the Shriners is where a lot of the concordant bodies or invite-only bodies come from. And now you get into... Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to kind of speak on the Shriners, is that the Shriners actually do really great work.
Absolutely.
And I have personal experience with them. My brother has osteogenesis imperfecta, and if it were not for the Shriners, my brother's life possibly could have been cut short. But because of their ability to fundraise and accommodate and make sure that he had the medical care at which time my family couldn't afford, I might be speaking of my brother in a past tense at this time. Mm-hmm. And so, let's just talk a little bit about the humanitarian aspect of Freemasonry, right? So obviously they're tied to the Shriners. And I believe that I was told that the Red Cross was also started by the Freemasons. Is that true?
No, but a Freemason was one of the founding people. So just to touch on that, that's exactly what happens. Like, the thing with Freemasonry, the best way to describe it, and there's a conspiracy theorist, David Icke from England, who, when I became a Mason because I was completely pro-conspiracy guy. I read Behold the Pale Horse in 1991, and I went down this deep rabbit hole, but we'll get to that a little bit later. But the best way to describe Masonry are like Russian dolls, and David Icke describes it that way. In other words, a shell within a shell within a shell, or an onion layer. So you have all these people cascaded around the world with certain fabrics tied to us. But you would get that in any community, in any race, in any creed. A lot of people today, you see a lot of anti-Semitism out there, right? Just to touch on that quickly. And people hate, they think that Jewish people are just hoarders and keep everything to themselves. But what they are is brilliant at business. and brilliant at adaptation because of having to always rise to success. If I took you to Williamsburg, Brooklyn right now, you would see imminently how different that area is compared to Red Hook right next to it. And if those communities would take a page out of the Hasidic book, maybe not the religious aspect, but the camaraderie and the teamwork, it would be a whole different story in ghettos around the world. But that's what happened. So basically, the charitable aspect of Freemasonry is par none. That is the very foundation of Masonry, and of course, the entire Shriners was developed around being a charity to sick children. I'm a Shriner. I'm also in the Scottish Rite Northern jurisdiction. I'm in 5 or 6 invite-only bodies. Some of them I won't name, but most Masons, are fully aware of what they are. And I've been involved with a lot of think tanks all throughout the late 90s into the early thousands. Like if you put Star Force HH and Russia in a search window, you will find tweets where I'm calling out Russia as an imminent threat during Obama's administration for the exact reasons that you see now. And it's because I had access to where we were thinking in geopolitics. Of course, I didn't know to what depth the far left had planted their flags, if you will. But in any secret society or secret guild, you could even liken that to the 3 agencies, the 3-letter agencies. They're not giving up any secrets, but the reason we look in disarray, the optics of it, is because a lot of these groups don't share the information properly. I think you would agree, there's a shooting 2 days ago. The father's charged, the kid is charged, you know everything about this kid. Yet we don't know a thing about the shooter to Donald Trump, the attempted assassination. All we hear is trickle-down hearsay. And why is that? Well, the thing is, the United States as a whole, our system is too big. It's too big and ahead of itself. We're a republic, and just like in Masonry, although we're great, and I will, herald them, myself included, but we are dysfunctional because everybody wants to be the shining star. Everybody they come in with their own ego, their own agenda, and that's what's happening to our politics. We're so spread across the line that the compromise is gone. And that's where, when we were sharp in Freemasonry 20, 30 years ago, only the charitable is what mattered, and going to the community and uplifting. And we don't recruit. So Masons, to be one, you have to ask one. Although I will find men that look interested and kind of drop a hint. And I've made a lot of Master Masons, I've given them the path. For instance, Scott Walter, I was on America on Earth. He's a Mason directly because of me. I took him to an event at the New York Grand Lodge, and the rest is history. Now he's all over TV. So at the end of the day,
can we pause? Can we pause right there? And so I want to just kind of, we're talking about the charitable, and then we also talked about shootings. Mm-hmm. Okay, we obviously know Freemasons have a lot of symbolism behind them, and I think some of it is alleged in conspiracy, and I think that some of it is actually true. Mm-hmm. When we see things, and you see, let's say the truther community, right, going to say, oh, well, look at this symbolism, the Freemasons were behind it, or, Illuminati is behind it, or so on and so forth is behind that. Like, how can a regular person who may be slightly better than a normie, right, discern the difference between actual symbolism? And can you talk a little bit more about the symbolism that is associated with Freemasonry?
Mm-hmm. All right. So let's start with, first and foremost, to understand it, people have to study it. They have to go into what the historical value is of the symbols themselves, right? So let's just take the obelisk, which is it's a form of an Egyptian pyramid. It's tall, made out of granite usually, or diorite. They were in Egypt. I did a show on it, and the 2 that I did my show on were from Heliopolis, actually, which was the pantheon of knowledge at the time, right? Also, the Washington Monument. Now, the symbology behind that is it's a phallic symbol. It represents as above, so below, and it means there's a duality and construct of the immanence of male and female. We cannot exist without each other. Now, if you get into a little bit of Buddhism and Hinduism, they say the same thing, but it's different, because what happens is with our cultures, European, is we have to put in this construct of religious aspect. And you see the same thing in Islam as well, only in the Middle East. But it has to be controlled to a parameter, or because once you break the parameters, you're not within their construct anymore. So the symbols are there throughout thousands of years, and they mean the same thing. For instance, right now, your head is directly in front of your logo, right? Now, that you could go look at Dionysus and all these other gods from the polytheistic religions that all tell the same story about Christ. Every single one of them. There's a famous film called The Zeitgeist that explains it all in deep detail of how it's the solstice, it's the equinox, and what happened was the ancients, all of them, whether it's the Mayans and Aztecs or the Egyptians, were incredibly adept at pinpointing mathematics. They knew where constellations were and where they were not. This is why, by the way, I crush and destroy people when it comes to flat Earth, but that's a whole nother show. Because there are constellations that we've never seen in this hemisphere, and we never will. Having said that, like for instance, the Mayan calendar, they have a long count and a short count. They were able to measure the precession of equinox, which is a wobble on the Earth that takes 26,000 years to complete. And that wobble takes 26,000 years while every day we're spinning and every year we're spinning. And they knew that mathematically. And all the ancient cultures did, and they based all their symbols off of that. This is why, the birds in the cave art, all drawn, look exactly the same, whether it was ancient, the Teotihuacans, Aztecs, Mayans, Egyptians, it doesn't matter. It's the same exact thing. So to delve into that is a whole study that you'd have to, envelope yourself into, but it's well worth it because then at least you know where it started. The most ancient times were Mesopotamians, the Sumerians. That story is tied to the Anunnaki, which they think was an alien race that basically seeded us, right? Had a whole slave race, and that's what we were. Supposedly they ran out of gold and they needed ours. But again, that's another story. Coming into the symbology now, just like the symbol behind your head, you want to drive home that marketing strategy, and you'd have to admit it's a strategy because it's the imagery that just keeps recurring and brings people back. It draws to the eye. And CBS, ABC, Fox, every single company on earth does the same thing. By the way, most of these companies are all owned by BlackRock now, right? Is that a conspiracy? Well, of course, if they have the power. Well, it is if they have the power. We don't know what built up to it, but someone got in power and was able to draw strings, right? So it's the same concept. Even in the groups and communities on X, not everybody's in them, nor could they be, right? So what happens is with all that said, people start to draw inference on what they think and what they've heard. So for instance, this symbol doesn't mean shit. That's just a diamond sign. Jay-Z is not a Freemason. I was involved with the Freemason song with Rick Ross, Jay-Z, and John Legend. John Legend blocked me, by the way, because I'm a Trump guy. But a lot of people just take the symbology and run with it and know nothing about it. Now, there are hand signs and gestures that I won't show that if I'm in distress, a Mason will stop and help me, right? But when it comes to what you see out there, that's just marketability with propaganda. And the problem is that every country on earth uses propaganda. And so does every marketer, like if I want to brand something. So yes, there is a direct tie to the symbols, but the esoterics of it is that hidden meaning. And that hidden meaning, as the best example, would have been the obelisk or the phallic symbol. And we believe most secret societies, I don't want to speak for everyone out there, but that duality aspect is inherent. You cannot populate the earth without it,
How interesting. Yeah. So like the symbol behind my head and then my shirt is checkered, and you have to be careful not to ever go like this for a photo because then before you know it, I'm a Freemason or part of something else, I'm just like, oh my God. And, some people are just really over the top about the symbolism. And I'm just like, well, I don't know. When I talk, I move my hands. I'm just lucky that they're not up here on camera because God only knows what kind of real, signs that I'm throwing up. So that's just kind of funny. It's like throwing up the wrong gang sign, especially in the truther community. You'll be burned, right? So I think that's pretty interesting. So speaking of like a checker pattern, that's a real big one that I hear people say over and over, that's tied to the Freemasons, like the black and white checkerboard.
It is, absolutely. So we call it trestle board, and our floors are black and white tiled, right? And in the lodge, you have a Tyler at the door, which is our security, and you have a senior and junior deacons, which usher info from the master to their wardens. There's a junior and a senior warden, and that's how the lodge works. It literally works just like our government, lock and key.
Well, so let me ask you this. So let's say like there's a music video and there's the black and white checkered, floor that's in there, or maybe even like Alice in Wonderland. And I hope I'm not conflating the two if there's a story behind one and not the other. Do you like the music industry is supposedly full of Freemasons? Is that really directly correlated?
Yes and no. So people use imagery. So the person who I always put it in my stuff. Like I direct my own videos with the band Bigfoot is Real. I'm a Freemason, so I'm going to use the symbology of it. And for me, I want people to know that I'm in this society that has not so much power, but a reach. Like for instance, it's a lot of leverage to have when you can go from one coast to another and have a bed to rest your head on, right? Where people get weird is the types of favors. And that's when you get into the Bilderbergers. It's when you get into like, the G8. These are launching pads for power that we could never grasp, really on a level that's just unfathomable to the average person. So yes, there's definitely symbolism that's used. That doesn't necessarily mean that they are tied to it. The music industry has some, but it's not plagued. And I shouldn't even use the word plagued because that, denotes that somehow it's bad. But there's other occults in entertainment that are extremely ominous, and we can leave it there. But and one other thing I would like to touch on is speaking on Bohemian Grove. You had this boxer not too long ago that went completely AWOL nuts on his page and makes claims that he was in this group, which of course was not true. The only guy to ever sneak into Bohemian Grove was Alex Jones, and he filmed it doing it. But that level of society is like princes, governors, kings, people that are handpicked in society. And, a lot of people will look at that and frown on it as something evil. But you name any type of sport or any type of business that people don't aspire to climb to the top. That's why I know for a fact that in our government or any company, everybody lies. Everybody has their own agenda. And anybody that says any different is definitely someone that you want to be careful or wary of. Because if you can be objective with what you are as a man or a woman, you're going to gain more camaraderie, actually. People are going to trust you more, especially like I try to post leading from the front. And I run my business the same way. Because I know that the people that are coming up under me need to know that I'm willing to get on my hands and knees to do the same task, And we don't know that about the fear factor of what we see optically, But just look at the news. Pick any mainstream media. They have a keyword right now. What is it that she's using, Kamala Harris? Joy, yeah. And look at where that derives from. And propaganda itself is complete repetitiveness over and over and over. And that is what's been broken with X very specifically. And here's a guy that has to be very careful because he is one of the top 5 or 6 DOD contractors now. An interesting story of how he got that those projects was
who, Elon?
Yeah, most companies, Boeing, Lockheed, Skunk Works, most of these companies do what they call a cost plus contract, which basically means the Department of Defense makes sure that they make a profit because it could, it's new stuff they're doing. So you might buy aluminum and all of a sudden it's 20 times the price because of the time frame that we're in. Or you can't get the natural product and run the process properly. So they do cost plus so that company, no matter what, makes a profit. And Elon came at it the opposite way and said, I'm giving you a direct number. And he crashed like 5 or 6 rockets while doing it. And it still worked out. But look at him now. I mean, you're dealing with a guy who knows things probably he will never talk about, to be perfectly honest with you. I mean, you're going to space for the United States government, and You look at Brazil shutting down his system. I mean, this is like wartime. You can taste it right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I believe that we are at war, and I think that it just looks so different from any other war that we've been in, right? It's a digital war, it's an information war. There's power struggles, there's cyber attacks, there's dirty deals going on,
Oh yeah.
and while on the surface, like, okay, sure, America is not necessarily war torn, but look at our economy, look at the amount of homelessness and the people struggling, and the way that no one can get help. And it's all about basically, I'll just call them refugees, right? Is that we're trying to help other nations, but they're putting other nations before theirs. But before I go off on a tangent about that, right? Because it just seems very fair. I want to kind of bring it back to when you said like our founding fathers, some of them were Freemasons, right? And then we see Freemasons in other aspects of, whether it's the music industry or global politics, kings and kings specifically. I know that I think later on women were allowed, and I kind of want to get into that too. But it seems like it's more so of like right now how you're explaining to me, and so just correct me if I'm wrong. It seems more of like, okay, Freemasons are a network. I know how Freemasons started. They had this very unique, very sought after skills. So that's why they were allowed to go from one place to another, while many other people could not travel, could not just go into someone else's, kingdom or whatever it is, right? So they could build this beautiful architecture, doing all of this stonework, doing the masonry work, right? So do you find that like, even like the start of America and our forefathers, that it's just more so happenstance that they were also Freemasons and maybe got a little bit ahead because of the network that they had, or were they strategically placed there to carry out an agenda for the Freemasons? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so there's a couple things there. First, we are directly tied to Knights Templar, which is about 500 years before the Renaissance time frame. You're looking like, the 1090s, 1100 time frame. And you had 4 crusades. And the Knights Templar were actually the first founders of the first World Bank, which is why they got killed off. Only they escaped, actually. So Friday the 13th, they were killed off. And that's where that fear factor of that date comes from, actually. And what happened was the French king was childhood friends with the Pope and the Grand Master of the Knights Templar. And they got so powerful that they were literally escorting people to and from the Middle East. So, for instance, if you were a rich family and you wanted to go visit Israel, you could get there in safe passage with about 100 Knights Templar, and they would go out multiple times throughout the year. And, Israel went through a back and forth between Islamic control and Christian control, back and forth. Saladin ended up winning it over, and then that leaked into what would further become the Ottoman Empire at some point. But that was a secret society completely unto the Christianity of the world, right? So even now we have Knights Templar that you can't join. You have to be a Freemason, but you can't not be a Christian. You have to be a Christian. And then from there, you go up to what we call the York College. So basically, the founding fathers escaped what would have been the most oppressive government in the UK, right? You couldn't practice freely. A lot of Masons, a lot of them were in the Roman Catholic guild, the belief system. A lot of them were Protestant. And you got to understand that there was an English king who basically was excommunicated by Rome because he wanted a divorce, and basically created what we know now as Protestant Christianity. So there was this rift in England, that was a direct effect of what happened here in the United States. And so when these guys came here, first the Pilgrims came, and then, you're looking in the 1600s, and, a lot of time passes. But our forefathers were going back and forth to England. Benjamin Franklin would go back to England, and he would go to France, because what they were doing was they were developing what you would call like an international body or a conglomerate of governments, right? So you have to look at it like this. The Pilgrims came to escape oppression. And then along the lines, as we were progressing west, the French-Canadian War happened, as we were doing the Louisiana Purchase, all these things happened where our founding fathers realized, wow, we don't want to be paying tax back to this kingship, right? We want to be free. And that's basically how it started. And that's really why France to this day is heralded as our best ally, because they've been with us and recognized us from the very inception of the United States. And so the Masonic Brotherhood is also odd because at the time, we had slaves, right? So there's a black charter called Prince Hall. And Prince Hall was a black gentleman who couldn't get into an American lodge and get granted a charter. So he went to England and got a charter from the Grand Lodge of England. And then Prince Hall Freemasonry was born. Now we all share lodges. Like a Prince Hall brother can come into a regular Grand Lodge or any lodge in the United States. But the United States is a work that's never complete. That's the point of it. And when they left to come here, it was still the point. So there's two things we use in Masonry that are symbols, but also working symbols. You have what we call a rough ashlar, which is an unpolished stone. And then you have a polished ashlar, which is like shiny marble. And what it represents is that to get to the polishment, you have to have a lot of shortcomings before it's polished. And you've learned from the mistakes. And oddly enough, there's a fine line between insanity and reality, right? The definition of insanity basically is, you keep doing the same thing over and over, expecting a different outcome. But let me ask you, did you say that when you rode your bike and it took you 20,000 times until boom, it happened? But you talk to any rich person in the world, I don't care who it is, someone that came from nothing, not old money. Gary Cardone, what's his name? There's a public speaker. His name is on the tip of my tongue. But anyway, these people kept doing it. They didn't quit. Same thing in believing in yourself, like with anything you do. Like this guy that's playing sports, a LeBron James or a Michael Jordan, who just they have that shine factor. It's not just talent, but it's doing it over and over. It's the repetition. So that's what the government and the United States and freedom and all that is to come to a fruition of, where are we going with it? And that's what it was when they left Europe also. And along those lines, there was so many ups and downs because success is not a straight line. It's not just up the ladder. The rungs break out as you're climbing.
Yeah. And so like every other society, you have to evolve. And that really sounds like what you're explaining for the Freemasons, right?
Exactly.
I did mention the inclusion of women into Freemasonry, but I don't really know anything about it or if they have their separate or whatever it is. Do you mind explaining that a little for us?
So the Grand Lodge of England started officially in early 1700s, right? That was the first official lodge. And from there, it moved forward to where we are now. But its direct ties are all the way back to the ancient Egyptians. When the Cleopatra's Needle obelisk was brought to America by Henry Geringe, he was an admiral for the United States. He was also a Mason. And the Vanderbilts actually funded this endeavor because England was giving us a gift, and that was the obelisk. They kept the other one. There's twins, Cleopatra's Needles. When they took them down for shipping, I mean collectively, the Masons that brought it back, we found oil, vinegar, corn, square and compass, plums. These are all symbolic tools that we leave when we do a cornerstone of any building that goes up that's founded by Freemasonry. The White House has one actually as well. It was found when they renovated it also. So we know for a fact that those symbols date all the way back at least 2,000 years minimum. Now, the other thing though, you could argue in coincidence that that's what builders use, a plumb line, a square and a compass, right? So that argument will always be there. There's no question about it. But if you're a betting person, I mean, I'm taking the bet that that's where the craft originates from. And even today in unions, like if you were to go onto a union job site, you're not just going to get the electrician's work. You got to be an apprentice first, which you work your way up to the mechanic, to the master mechanic. So it's the same thing. So you're looking at something that's definitely many thousands of years old, no question about it. And then basically American Freemasonry, you could argue, is like a reinvention of it, because they did have this fear of allowing people that could sneak in because of other societies that had existed previously, like the Illuminati.
To be clear, the Illuminati and Freemasons are just separate secret societies.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, cool. Freemasonry and their involvement in any kind of mind control or social engineering. So I know that we wanted to talk about language a little bit. Can we dive into that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Kind of talk about symbolism, which are things like you said, apparently only Freemasons know, and the things that are commonly, the diamond signs really don't mean anything. When it comes to language and mind control, to what degree are Freemasons involved with controlling language and mind control?
Well, that would be the Russian doll analogy, in my opinion. I happen to, first, I did some construction work. I can't name the company because they are one of the top 5 DoD companies now, but they were a different company then. We cored underneath Denver International from like 92 to like 99. And these DoD clearances, each company that's there, A, doesn't know what B is doing, right? But the managers, meaning the people in the agencies, they know and they're coordinating. So you get to a phase and then you hand it over, and then another phase comes and they put the pieces together. I met some very interesting people there, and Denver International is loaded with Freemasonic regalia all throughout the airport for a reason. But I know some very high up people in agencies that have been in some top secret stuff. I won't name them specifically, them or what it is, but a lot of it's MK Ultra style types of things. And this is, you have astral projection. But in Masonry itself, tied to the esoterics, is alchemy of how to turn things from one thing into another, and a lot of chemical dealings. So there are, no question, people that have been in our guild and craft that have high positions, that may or may not have been involved with some of these, you could even call them attacks on people, because some of the stuff the CIA has done is reprehensible, but definitely there are people involved. Is it a Masonic thing? No, it's just that there's some Freemasons that were involved with that, and that's the same thing with last week. Both Gunther and Chuck Colesto, they posted up about the Hells Angels going to Colorado, blah blah blah. I was able to successfully get them to take those posts down. We follow each other, but imagine a guy like Gunther gets 80,000 mentions a day. So I reached out to General Flynn's manager, Chad, and then he got back to them, and then Gunther's in my inbox 5 minutes later, and we talked, and everything went down the way it was supposed to, because within the 1% community, yes, there are terrible bikers and there's good bikers, right? So it's like that in anything, alluding to, like in some of the 1% groups, the main drug is methamphetamine that a lot of times is made in the bathtub somewhere in fucking bumblefuck, right? Pardon my French. But
right next to Kamala Harris's collard greens. You guys hear that?
Yeah. But yeah, I would say the answer to that question, though, is that within any level of the United States government, you're going to have a percentage of these people that do have connections, like Skull and Bones, as an example, is not tied to Freemasonry at all. And yet it's a launching pad for senators and presidents, so yeah.
Is Skull and Bones, would you consider them an evil entity?
I think there's some evil men that came out of there, right?
Yeah.
It in of itself is just a fraternal aspect that was the launching pad, right? It's kind of like even like with my take on weapons. I love weapons. I grew up hunting and fishing. I don't think we should have a fucking Abrams tank in our backyard, because if you don't know how to use it, what's the point? They can just drone bomb you anyway, right? But it's not, the weapon's an inanimate object. It cannot fire itself, right? Now, yeah, you could drop a weapon and it goes off. That's not what I mean. But the weapon itself is just an extension of the man, you know? So we always look for these answers elsewhere. I have a really ultra liberal friend from high school. Every morning he breaks my chops, and every morning I break his chops. And he just can't get over it. He's like, you vote for a pathological liar. He's losing his mind. I'm like, dude, even Donald Trump in his worst speaking state is 100 times better than Kamala Harris or Joe Biden. Like, he'll take out of context a sliver, like there were great people on both sides, that statement, which was really a 3-minute dialogue that they don't show you. And that's what they harp on. And again, that goes into the propaganda, because these Democrats are all fooled by hyperbole, you know? So, yeah. So
do you think that any of the Freemasons are Democrats, or is that their own personal choice?
No, there's all walks. We go through exactly what you see happening right now. Average lodge, we can't even get through who's going to make the ham sandwich. Right? And I'll tell you why this is. And I speak on it because I don't really give a shit, to be honest with you. I'm as high as you can get. No one can take that from me. Even if I walked away today, you still can't say I didn't do it. I'm all over TV for it, and everybody knows it, right? So, but what happens is you get a lodge that has a lot of money, let's say, from the people that are in there donating to it, right? And they don't want to let that money go. Or they own a building that's worth $30 million. So they don't just let any Mason join. You can go and become a concordant member and pay their dues, but you are never ever going to become an officer in that lodge, ever, because they want to tighten the purse chains. You understand? So, for instance, if you want to do a certain charity that some other brother thought he wanted to do before you, they'll blackball you. And the term blackball comes from our lodges. If we don't like how to vote, you get a black cube. That's where it comes from. If we don't like the candidate and someone petitioned him to come in, he gets a black cube. If you get one or more, you can't be a Mason. So what happens is you get a lot of who's who, and there's a clash between the old ideologue and the new. I have a brother in a lodge out in Ohio where a transgender guy, they didn't know he was, but now he is a master Mason, and he's trying to raise funds to allow kids to have a place to be trans. It's completely diabolically against Freemasonry, every single piece of it. And when we tell people to be a Mason, when we're asking them, you know, when we're going over their petition, we are telling them, our vow to them is, we will not ask you to do anything that will conflict with your beliefs. And yet that's a direct confliction to 90% of the world's beliefs. The perception that everybody can be a shoebox or a cat or you know, a trans whatever, that's a very small percentage of what reality is, you know, but it's really thwarted what the worldview is. It's terrible. So we go through the exact same stress that you see in regular everyday life, in any agency, in any group, in any business, any government. It's the same thing.
Amongst the church as well. You have some churches that are promoting, you know, alphabet community. Yeah. And no offense to say alphabet community, I'm dyslexic and I cannot get those letters straight for the life of me. So it is that, right? Before you move on, I want to talk about, you did mention the black cube. Yeah. And if you remember during BLM, that was something that came up when everybody posted the black square, and then you had the conspiracy personnel, because they're not theorists, right? The conspiracy personnel saying that everybody posting this black square was actually related to Freemasons. Can you confirm or deny that?
I don't know that I believe that, but you know, all it would take is one person to say what I just said, and then it gets like a game of telephone, and everybody wants to believe it. You know, I'll give you an example. This is how things can spread wildly out of control. So there's a whole pro-black element in the United States. Not necessarily a bad thing, but if you take Farrakhan, this is a guy who exploits the community and actually uses parts of the Shriner Guild within their religion. Number one, the Nation of Islam is not recognized anywhere in the world as an actual Islamic authority, period. Elijah Muhammad, who is the founding father, is a lying whatever. I can't even say it. But basically manipulated his people. He even said that he was a direct descendant of Muhammad. That's a complete no-no in Islamic faith, right? What happens is that the American black has a hard time tracing their bloodline because of the slave trade. This is why this whole Kamala Harris race thing is an issue. So Jamaica is run by basically China right now. The whole airport is owned by them. You, being a white person, could grow up there and end up speaking Patois and sound just like a black Jamaican. The father was Irish and Indian, because Ireland and the UK were the same people then, were the controlling colonizers of Jamaica. They were the ones funneling the trading of the slaves. And her mom was Indian. So she's not black, period, zero. Not even African American. But you tell people enough that she's black, the average black that thinks they're suppressed because they've been told that their whole lives, right? Starting with, all the government trickle-down things that we passed in the 40s, 50s, and 60s to make people feel like they're, more part of the home, but is really a detriment, actually. And at the end of the day, the pro-black element really believed that the first president was a black guy, right, named Johnson, which of course was not true. The Articles of Confederation, which was before our government now, had a Johnson as the president of the Articles of Confederation. And blacks, if you type this in right now, the pro-blacks spun it to this black gentleman whose name was Johnson too, but it was later on. It was after the War of 1812. And we sent him to Liberia, actually, as an emissary. And because he was black, they didn't do their homework, and they conflated the two stories. So they actually believed that Barack Obama was not the first black president, that George Washington didn't exist, and this guy Johnson did, So the point is that when you drill home this propaganda into someone who only wants to see that, they end up thinking that. The other famous story is in Behold the Pale Horse, William Cooper, which is why I became a Mason, was because of that book. And William Cooper died like the first week of November 2001 by the government, by the way. He basically said that the shooter of JFK was the driver of the limousine, which of course was not true. But I went and researched his Zapruder film, and let me tell you something. For like 18 months, I swore that shooter was the driver, until one day I looked at it real close and digitized it. And what I realized was you had Connolly in the passenger seat. When the shot goes off, you have to remember he was shot. So Connolly moves, and there's this gap between his chin and the rail of the door of the car. So that it looks like 2 inches in the video. And just that change of his face looks like a pistol, because when the shot went off, the driver looked also. So then you realize that it's the shape of a gun, but there's no gun. It's just airspace. And so when I first started publicly speaking in the hip hop community, I would wow people with that. I would show them the film, tell them I'm a Mason, I'm going to prove them who shot Kennedy. Everyone's like, oh my God, blah, blah. And then I would stop it and show them how wrong they were based on what the perception was. And so that happens a lot with symbols. People hear something and then they can't get away from it. Now, that doesn't mean that there can't be some tie to it, because as I just told you, the black cube comes directly from Freemasonry. There's no question about that.
Yeah, and sometimes I think that those things can be used for entertainment or to throw people off the trail of what's really happening. I think that's really why we're bombarded with so much information now, right? So something as significant as a school shooting and dead kids comes up, and then it's something else. Donald Trump gets shot, and then the president of the United States decided to retire. Like, there's always something overshadowing. So I think that based on the data that gets scraped from online, like, these agencies know what it is people are saying. They know what we're talking about. And that applies even for, especially specifically for truther community and different conspiracies and things. And I think a lot of times these things are just thrown into the mix. So that way we're all just like chasing our tail. Meanwhile, like, the government's just taking boatloads of money, overseas someplace, and we can't do anything about it. And so part of the obsession of what we call conspiracy theories, I think, comes from just not being able to, not feeling like you actually control anything. And it's really sad, to be honest with you. Like, I'm a truther. I love a good story. Don't get me wrong. But especially having the podcast, I always want people to leave with like an actionable item. Like, you got something out of it, you got the information, and then now you can like do something to make your life better, right? So I'm always like encouraging people like, hey, you know, don't get in too many online fights. Like, it's literally just the internet. Like, go make a sandwich, hang out with your kids, right?
Yep.
We need to take a little break from time to time. But all the information you shared is like pretty incredible, and I think really debunks a lot of things. Of course, we'll have people in the comments or people sending me DMs being, you know, saying that possibly like you're lying, like he's not telling you the truth. So just let's get that out of the way now and say, what do you say to those people?
I mean, listen, you could ask me anything. I'm an open book. I'm just not going to tell you what Jimmy Hoffa is. But I will be the very first to tell you. And look, the people that have those comments and commentary, I could not tell them they're wrong in their mindset, because I'm not here to change their minds. My recommendation is to be stoic. There's only a certain amount that you can control, you know, within your parameters of your own life. It's really that simple. First, I will tell you right away, all these agencies are who's in control. Make no mistake about it, which is why this happened with Biden recently, right? They are, imagine if we got attacked on election day, right? Or in between presidencies. There's a protocol for that. The Speaker of the House, the Vice President, all these things. It's why on 9/11, one plane went one way and another plane went the other way, and you didn't know where Bush was. Like, so, and as archaic and crazy as that might be, the United States government, it's still the best place in the world. I wouldn't change it, because believe me, if they're flying around UAPs and fake UFOs, there's a reason for it, right? If they're doing ultra secret studies on people and groups, and I'm not saying it's right, because there's a sufferable effect from that, but obviously there's a reason that they're doing it. These things are so dire that if you knew the absolute truth, I believe we would be in complete chaos. I truly believe that. And what I'll touch on, within the UFO community, there's a guy named Luis Alessandro who had come out, and he was directly in part and control of what they're calling UAPs instead of UFOs now, right? And it's an unidentified aerial phenomenon. They're basically admitting, hey, there's these things, we don't know what they are. But let me just leave you with this. If we're using drones now that can be supersonic, well, that's because we know that the human body cannot fly above a certain G-force, right? So if you keep that in mind, why would an alien be any different if they have a brain? It's the inertia. So if you do 18 Gs and stop, your brain is melted in your head. You cannot sustain, which means anything you're seeing probably is unmanned anyway, even if it was from another galaxy, right? If we're at that now with our own drone system, far superior to anything else on Earth, that means whoever's coming here, if that's real, are so far ahead that we can't fathom it. They probably don't even have sex anymore. They probably don't need to. They can be whatever they want. And Dr. Stephen Greer, who is a world-renowned scientist in the field of ufology, he says that we're like 100 years behind in tech on purpose. And we're only scratching the tip of the iceberg now with Elon. But basically, if the world knew that electric could be free, like Wi-Fi floats around, then you can't tap the meter. So these are all things that are happening that the government has no choice but to control, because the one thing they know is when capitalism fails, and one day, where does it go? Are we really supposed to sit here and just keep saying, yeah, it's okay, you can be 100 trillion in debt in 20 years? What are we doing? What we're actually admitting, it's been exposed through digital crypto, is everything is a Ponzi, including our own dollar system. And that's who's running it all. So what happens is the people commenting, they need to have this inherent belief that someone is pulling the strings, but it's not just a mix of one or two. It's a merging of all of it at the same time, and going against that thread, or even trying to create their own version, would be China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, right? But the ebb and flow of power has always been this way. World wars have always been fought over money, every single one of them. You know, the United States didn't get involved in the World War II until Pearl Harbor, but let me tell you something. Schindler, Prescott Bush, ThyssenKrupp, all of Carnegie, all of our industrial revolutionary companies were doing business with Hitler. They didn't even care that the U-boats were shooting ships down, just like the Houthis are doing now in the Middle East, right? So to the people commenting that are in this want to know more, they do need something to blame. And the secret societies that are well known are an easy target, right? And absolutely, there are definitely Masons within the government, but there are many other people within the government that have and wield power also.
I'll agree with you about the technology for sure. I think that's a really great point. And I've said this for probably a really long time now, is that we have the technology, like as regular people, that we're allowed to have. What our government, what the militaries around the world have is things that we probably can't even fathom. And so then when we start talking about aliens and outer space and rocket ships and UFOs and all of these other things, we could, it's almost like the propaganda, the programming from as early as the Twilight Zone till today, you know, Mars Attacks and whatever other end of the world catastrophic movie. Those are the only real, that's where our thoughts and imagination really comes from, because without that, no one would really be thinking about, I wonder what these aliens are like. If we had never been told about aliens, I don't think we would ever be talking about aliens. You understand what I'm saying? It's all part of a programming. And so I really like that, kind of challenging myself as to what do I believe things to be has to come from somewhere, and getting to the bottom of that is really the fun part, right? So you can kind of like unprogram yourself, and it's okay to say, I don't know. Like the technology that's out there, I don't know. I'm not in the military. I'm not a super secret scientist that would know those things, but I can just have the belief that it's far beyond anything that I have, or probably that I'm capable of even imagining. So I think that's pretty spectacular. We talked about kind of like the elitist and so on and so forth. I just wanted to ask if you knew in particular, when it comes to the British royal family, if they were involved in Freemasonry, and if you could name any of them.
You could ask me names and I'll nod yes or no, but there are over hundreds of years British royals that have been Freemasons, 100%. Scottish as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was still listening. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I was waiting for you to ask a question of who.
Yeah, because I think that's interesting. And then you had mentioned some presidents that have been Freemasons, but I feel like some of that information is already exposed on who they are. Do you think that the information floating around is accurate?
Absolutely. Yeah, there hasn't been a Freemasonic president in like the last 8 presidencies. Yeah. But that doesn't mean it's a bad thing. You know, the Roosevelts would be the best example. You know, the FDR plan, though, a lot of that is what caused modern day failure in society now. That New Deal ideology only could work for a certain amount of time because, like I was saying about capitalism, it hits a cap. So at that point, the cap starts to break and fail, right? So for instance, if you don't upkeep the city with the right funding, every bridge that's a suspension bridge has to be, the cables have to be tightened. You got to use marine-based paint, redo the concrete. There's so much upkeep on all this infrastructure. The Robert Moses is who built the Cross Bronx in New York City. They went right through the Bronx and completely severed communities like you wouldn't believe. Every bridge and tunnel was put in by Robert Moses, and is now the Bridge and Tunnel Authority, which they charge to this day $15, $16, $18 to get in and out of the city. It was all meant to constrict the flow of people while those people were dependent upon the government. And that's where we are now because of the situation with COVID, everybody thinks that someone's coming to save us, but they're not. You know, look at the war in Israel or even the Middle East theater, door-to-door urbanized combat. That's what would happen here. And we're not ready for that. Believe me. Number one, we don't even have 1 million ground troops. And so that ties into when people are like, well, they're coming to get your guns. Well, they ain't coming to get your guns because they don't have enough troops to do it, first and foremost. Regular police are not coming to come and get your guns. You can look no further than Sandy or Katrina. When calamity happens, they're going home to their families like they should. And so what that means is, like the Freemasons, we need to have militia-minded, community-based groupings like ham radios. What do you do if your phone goes dead and Twitter goes down? How are you going to connect with the people that you talk every day on Spaces with? If there was a tsunami and earthquake that took California out in fucking 5 seconds flat, how would you know if that infrastructure is gone? So the United States we're so big. This is what I was saying earlier. Everything we have is so big where you cannot manage it all, you know? And we'll always be begging the government for this handout or help because we feel inferior. We don't feel superior the way we're supposed to. I don't mean superior to other people. I mean, as a civilian, as a community, we're supposed to uplift and build. But now what's happening? All these migrants are coming in and they're changing. It's multiculturalism within your face. It's okay to be Islamic, no question. But don't come to my community and try to fucking change it. And in New York City, there are Muslim police driving around in copycat NYPD cars, enforcing that Sharia law is impactful in their parts of their neighborhoods. Chinese have police precincts in the United States. They're buying up agriculture. This is all true facts. Half the buildings in Manhattan are empty because some foreign entity owns it. They took all the equity out of it. And now, yes, the value is still there and it's going to keep going up. That's how they make the equity back. But they're willing to wait 100 years, just like China always is. So people don't realize what's happened here is this long reach of socialism is coming to a head by telling everyone, you can be anything you want. We're equitable. You're perfect. It's okay to be this. You can be a shoebox. And there's so many options that there's no focus. All while the three-letter agencies still have a world to run and fight against. So, you know, looking at this whole Russia thing, I shared Gunther's post the other day. Yeah, the Democrats are going to push this bullshit theory of Russia, Russia, Russia. But make no mistake that Russia is, in fact, interfering. There's no question about it. But are they going to change my opinion? No, because I'm already voting Trump. So shy of them forcing me to go vote somewhere, it's all bullshit because the whole world is involved in a worldwide propaganda. You know. By the way, the reason I hearken to the technology aspect is because that's all that matters, actually. Where do we go from here? If you just imagine the microchips, right? Or Elon Musk, the cyber thing that he wants to use, the Cyberlink. We're going there, guys. You already carry around the microchip in your pocket every day. There's nothing you do that they don't know if they want to. Zero. So this idea that someone's in control, you gave it up. You updated your phone every time they asked you to. You didn't read the fine print on your TikTok, on your Facebook. You know what I mean? Like, so we have this convoluted view, but it's really we're just humans and we're not perfect. And neither are they. They're powerful, right? And you just got to pray that they have a long, big goal because no matter what, there's nothing we can do to change it. Ultimately, that's why I was saying my advice to everyone is to be more stoic. I just watched a reel the other day where the gentleman said, the lady asked him a question. She said, you know, should you worry about world news and situations? He goes, no, not at all. Turn the TV off. Because unless it's a nuclear bomb coming or an EMP, it doesn't impact you. You can go to the supermarket. You don't need the media news to tell you that your steak's $45. You're living it. You know, some people are so dense that they don't recognize that. They think that the steak went up because of Trump and they're being told all this crap. But we know why it is, you know. And there will be those in your comments that say that I deflected or went DARVO by bringing up something else. But actually, it's not something else. It's directly tied. Because if I have power as a Freemason, and believe me, I'm very well connected. I can call on partners with the Marley family, Wyclef, but I networked all of that. If I told you my whole history, you wouldn't even believe it. But it's true, and I weaved this network even before I was a Freemason. Does Freemasonry benefit me by putting me closer to a global scale and reach? Of course it does. For me, that's why I like it. Some Masons don't even recognize that they have that ability. But it's not just Masonry. It's anywhere you go. If you go to a sports club that everybody plays softball and you want to further yourself in that sport or start your own team, you're in the right place. So there's nothing different other than the fact of who are in the societies that have money. And that's the fear factor for people. And there's a lot of rich people out there, but it's not just within Freemasonry, you know. Like Bill Gates has nothing to do with us. I think the guy's diabolical, you know. They know the answers. They know what's happening. They know where we are 20 years going down the path, but they're not going to speak on it. Why did Warren Buffett cash out some of these giant equitable EFTs that he had? That to me is really scary. You know, Berkshire Hathaway is like the number one major trade. You know, it's one of the stocks is like $700,000 for one share. So there's games being played on a level that the average person can't even think, and that's where all these questions come, and they should come. You know, I had all these questions. That's why when I read Behold the Pale Horse, I'm like, dude, I got to sneak in the Freemasonry. I wanted to find out what were all these theories, and what I found out was it's just like everything else. Yes, there's some, you know, great things about it, but it can easily fall apart like anything else, you know.
Yeah, you have to foster the community, and it takes a lot of great people working together to make anything really great happen, in my opinion. And so it sounds like the Freemasonry is not something that everyday people or in the truther community should really be afraid of. It's more of seeming like it boils down to character, right? So we could all be members of the same church, but just because one pastor is nefarious or one person is nefarious and wind up like murdering their wife, right? That doesn't mean we're all murderers. So I feel like this has really been eye-opening. You did mention as far as like having chapter dues and all these other things. Is that really where Freemasonry is funded? Is from dues that people pay into the society?
It's mostly dues, and for instance, the female derivative is Eastern Star, right? And you know, you basically, it's like a mirror image of the male counterpart. Although in France, there are female blue lodges, which are the 3 degrees of Masonry that are existing. It is mostly dues based, which is why a lot of lodges are closing. So the Grand Lodge in New York's got like 40 different lodges, but it's a high rise, and they own the building. And there's other things they own. You know, each state has a Grand Lodge. We have colleges, Masonic colleges that people are paying tuitions into, where your kids can automatically go to summer camps and so on. But they're also very huge donations. Like most of the 33rd degree Masons, which there's very few of, are because of doing an extreme amount of charitable work or something beyond the means. Because you get invited to that degree, you don't just become the degree. There is no new knowledge by being a 33rd degree Mason. A Master Mason, the 3rd degree, is the top level of degrees. But within that, you have the Scottish Rite, which goes up to 32nd, and then Invite to 33rd. Then you have the Shrine. And then you have York Rite, where you can go all the way up to Knights Templar, what they call the Commandery. And then there's York College, which is an Invite only, which is like the Blue Lodge's version of 33rd degree on the Scottish Rite. So there's many donations, though. So, for instance, you know, the Shriners Hospital is all donation money that's given, and I'm talking probably north of $250 million a year, easy. And speaking on that, I run a major construction firm in New York City, at the Mount Sinai chain, and almost all their projects are paid from grants from rich people that have a stake or a reason to invest into that type of specificity of a disease, let's say, you know, whether it's Crohn's or cancer, ALS, you know, because if you don't research the hell out of it, you're never going to come to, and because you have people, there's no shyness of people that are sick. So of course they're going to use that money for people that need the help, you know. But yeah, it is mostly all charitable money and donations. Absolutely.
Okay, awesome. Well, listen, I want to be super respectful of your time and our audience's time. I want to thank everybody that's joined us up until this point. Please share this with a friend who says that, the things they say about the Freemasons, right? Say, here's a bit of truth for you, and I'd be interested to see what people really have to say. We did touch on a lot of topics when it comes to it, and there was a couple of points where you said, well, we could kind of dive into that if you wanted to. But I want to ask our audience, of all the things mentioned, what would you like to hear more about? Because I definitely would love to work with Brendon again. He's been such an awesome guest so far. So kind of moving towards closing and respecting your time and all that good stuff. I feel like you've answered a lot of the questions that I had on my mind from the jump. And you did that so wonderfully. So I guess I'm going to turn it back to you and just say, is there anything that you would like to use this opportunity to dispel about Freemasonry? And what do you have to say to our audience in general? You want to leave on a positive note? You can.
Yeah, I'm the best of the best to ever be the best at being the best to ever be the best to do it. I'm only kidding. Listen, any males that want to have more knowledge or experience, you can DM me. I can reach out to your local lodge. We have what's called Brother Bring a Friend Night. Most lodges in the summer are dark, and then in the fall, which starts this week, we open back up. And some lodges have multiple lodges that enact within their guild. But we're open to new people, and the only way you're going to know is by coming in and seeing what it's about. And of course, it takes several meetings, and maybe you're not, maybe you don't like it. Maybe you think, yeah, these guys are definitely Satan lovers, whatever you might think. But you won't know if you don't try. So that's for one. For two, there's a lot of shows you can watch out there. History Channel has a couple great ones. The Grand Lodge of New York and England are a little bit weird on what they allow to be seen, but most of the documentaries that are filmed from a historical aspect are pretty accurate as far as describing what the craft is like. For Eastern Stars, I have direct connection with them as well. So for the females that are interested, by all means. And to be honest with you, the matter of how you feel. Like I'm not going to change people's minds that aren't open to listening. But like I just described very diligently with Aleister Crowley, people will probably want to talk about, there was a slavery aspect of Freemasonry, which I tried to touch on with Prince Hall, right? But Albert Pike would be a perfect example of racism within Masonry, which did exist. He was the Grand Wizard or whatever the hell it is of the KKK of the Southern jurisdiction. So you have defaults within anything, I'm not here to fix that because Masonry was about always polishing yourself to be better, but definitely anybody can reach out. I'm more than willing to speak about it. And, I got a lot of TV stuff coming out. I'm filming a documentary. I'm involved with a new Steven Seagal movie that's coming out in 2026. We just have a bit of a problem with him being in Russia, right? And the sequel we're doing, the original production, is being real tough with allowing us to call it the same name. So we're going to kind of tweak that a little bit. And that's pretty much it,
Okay, awesome. So I'll go ahead and finish us off and bring us to a close, right? I want to thank you definitely, Brendon, for joining us. You can find all of Brendon's content linked below. Definitely follow him on X. He even has his own website and manages a band, is part of a band, Bigfoot.
Yeah, bigfootisreal.net. I'm in the band. I write the music. My lead singer is in the band. They got a DJ, full guitarist, bassist, drummers. Yeah, we do a little bit of everything. We got a song by Wyclef out called Informer. It's beautiful.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah. So I'll definitely have all of that linked below. I want to thank our audience for joining us, all the questions and comments that you guys have dropped, and will continue. If you're watching this on the replay, of course, even if you've reached the end of it and you've enjoyed this, please drop us a comment and let us know, and definitely share with a friend. Thanks for being here. Thanks for watching. And until next time, God bless.